My name is Mrs. Coulter. I teach in Chillicothe, Ohio, which is south of Columbus and east of Cincinnati. And I have been teaching there for about 10 years, just about as long as I've been an AP reader for WHAP essays. So I have read the DBQ most, Changing Continuity Over Time, and Compare and Contrast a little bit. Last year I got promoted to table leader, so that was a lot of extra stress because I had to train people to read your essays more effectively and make sure that you got a fair score for them. Oh, I need to erase this thing. Today we're going to talk about document-based questions and what they're actually expecting you to write. They call it a document-based question, but they really want you to write a research paper, right? They're giving you all the evidence that you need. So several of us at the reading have changed it to an evidence-based response. You're given a question, your response is based on evidence. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And my plan to go over is dissecting a DBQ.
Hey guys, you should all be in your classrooms now if you are attending the AP Social Studies session. And we're going to go ahead and start session 2.
Alrighty. We're going to look at some tips for dissecting the DBQ, what is and isn't point of view, the fact that you're analyzing and not summarizing the documents, and asking for that additional document. Don't just litter and say, oh, it'd be really swell to have this additional document without doing what? Explaining why. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Are you familiar with this? Okay, this is our scoring guide. What is this part over here on the left? Everything you need in the DBQ. And if you have everything you need in the DBQ, then it's kind of like getting out of jail free. You can pass go and collect $200, all that. You can get an additional 2 points, which helps drive your final score up to that 5 that you're all seeking, right? Everybody seeking 5? All right. So let's start. How many times do you, in your classrooms, read the question? Once. Okay. My advice to you is to read it 3 times. First time through, just look for the topic. What's the subject matter that I'm going to be reading about? Second time through, I would ask that you dissect the question. And the third time through, just to put your mind at ease and make sure that you know what you're writing about. My students have to show me that they understand the prompt. When we test, I may throw prompts just on the test and have them do this. So when I ask them to box in, I'm asking them to box in the action, underline all parts of the topic, and identify the periodization. What is that fancy term, periodization? What does it mean? When it takes place. What are some tricky ways that College Board can show you that they're asking you a periodization question without giving you the periodization? Okay, the first way that we would love if they would give us is the years. But they don't always do that because they're kind of jerks. So what else? Referencing events. Okay, they can reference events. What else?
Give specific empires.
Okay. So
places.
Yeah. So empires, because those are definitely a periodization piece. 2 years ago, they asked a question and they did this. 20th century. And people left points on the table because they did not even realize that that was a period of time. And so they wrote about a different period of time. So what do you need to know about the centuries? Pardon?
If it says 20, doesn't that mean it's like 1900?
Yes. So it's always a year ahead of the years that it actually is. So the 1900s are the 20th century. We're currently in the 21st century, even though we're only in 2000. Okay? Be familiar with those references. What are some of the actions that you could be asked to do on a DBQ?
Analyze.
Okay? You can analyze. What else? Is that it? Describe. Bless you, bless you. Anything else? Well, they could ask you to evaluate that.
What is?
But action words are generally analyze, describe, list, identify, illustrate, all of those critical thinking skills, questions that you see on a test that you go, oops, what am I supposed to do now? Okay? You want to be familiar with those terms and know what they're asking you to do, not just for WHAP, but also for ACT and SAT. Yes?
I didn't get it.
Well, that is something that we can fix. All right. So you're going to get some practice later on today showing me that you can dissect your prompts, because that helps your brain calm itself down a little bit while you're writing this test and actually focus on writing a response that answers the prompt that they are asking. We get plenty of essay responses, some of which are good essays that aren't on the topic that they're asking you on which you should be focusing. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're focused on the topic that they want. So we're going to practice this. Understanding the prompt. On your handout, you have a slide that looks like this. It's the second one down on that page if you've been following along. And it says using the documents. That's where it starts. So I want to see you deploy these skills. Box in the action. There's more than one action. Circle the periodization. And underline the topic. All right, let's start with periodization. What's the periodization that they give you? Han and Roman. Okay? So again, it's one of those things where you have to be familiar with the different time periods of WHAP. What information could you use? What time period could you use information from? What unit? I'm hearing different answers. Okay, so it's classical era. So you can use evidence from that time period. But the good news about the DBQ is you don't need to know a darn thing about it, because they're going to give you everything you need to use to prove your point. Okay, what's our topic? Attitudes toward technology. I can't tell you how many essays I read about how the Han and Romans developed their technologies, but not about how they felt. It's a POV essay. Okay, and what are the 3 action steps that you should have boxed in? Okay, analyze, whoops, where to go? Analyze, identify, and explain. So this one wants you to do 3 different steps. A couple of things about the thesis. I don't want you to lose any thesis points. Where should your thesis be placed? Very beginning and at the very end. Okay, they're not going to tell you you have to write a 5-paragraph essay, but they do want to see your thesis at the very beginning, because that's what they're evaluating. And by the time you get to the end of your essay, what's going to have happened with your thesis? You're going to have proven it, and you may be able to write a more eloquent thesis. which would get you bumped into that other category for the thesis if you've earned all basic points, okay? And we all want more points. When my students write theirs, they have to, they have to include a connection to the world. Just because of the change in continuity over time essay, it's nice to be able to say this was also happening in this other place. So you have to identify the topic and subject about which you're writing, the type of essay that you're writing. A couple of years ago, DBQ actually asked a change in continuity over time question as a DBQ, which makes it really hard to think about it. We're trying to do a better job of writing the questions so that they're questions that you can answer without having to double your skill set. Set up your argument. It's like a roadmap. Be specific without giving away your evidence, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. The thesis is really, really crucial because it can bring you back to what you're supposed to be talking about. When you are writing your test, you may experience a little bit of spacing out because you stressed out. And if you have a thesis and you have a roadmap already pre-planned, you know where you're going with your essay and you can go back to it. That thesis helps you, if you set it up correctly, write a better response. Let's talk about citations. Here's an example of what we would love to see in a citation. This one is filled with potential points. So Putin demonstrated his plan for Crimea by providing a verbal ultimatum that Ukrainian troops must be out of Crimea by 10 p.m. We found this in document A. This display of authority helps illuminate Russia's plan to reclaim area lost during the breakup of the former Soviet Union. Furthermore, he probably waited until after the Olympics to avoid a failure to recoup some of the monies put into the development of Sochi. So where's my POV statement in this?
This display of authority.
Well, partially with display of authority, but what did you think?
Furthermore, he probably waited until after the Olympics to avoid failure to recoup some of the monies put into the development.
Right. So I'm talking about why he might have written it at this point in time. That's saying, here's POV without saying, and Putin's POV was probably. Okay, it's just a more elaborate way of writing information. This piece right here where I talk about his purpose helps show what? Because that first statement is basically just a summary. I show the reason, and I'm showing that I understand the reason, which gives me understanding. Okay? And what type of document is this? Okay, so my verbal document then equates to a speech. It's a speech. It's in writing, but it was a speech at one point. Okay, so I'm getting multiple points with my document. I'm getting understanding, I'm getting POV, and I'm showing that I used it. Okay, I didn't just litter it alongside the highway somewhere. I actually used it to prove something. And when I talked to the first group this morning, they said that you group by bucketing, correct? Does everybody bucket? Awesome, because that will help you write a better essay. So that's a really, really good tip that your teachers have given you. I recommend that you shoot for 3 or 4 buckets. I know the scoring guide says 2 or more, but 2 or 3 years ago, we got to the reading and they changed their criteria. After everybody had already written their essays, they decided you have to use all of the documents, which is what you guys are taught to do. But those students had been taught to use all or all but one. So that changed their scores that year because of the scoring change. And now those of us who score essays teach people that you should always have an extra. Always shoot above what their minimum is. Here are some sample groups. The better ones are the styles or forms of government that are being utilized, the social class or the profession of the authors or artists, the type of document that you're looking at, if it's pro, con, or neutral, simple grouping that you can use, but you have to elaborate. So you guys use Sprite, right? Not Persia or Pirates. It's the same thing. So Sprite, it's not enough to just say that there were social causes behind Putin's decision to not invade the Ukraine during the Olympics. I can't just say there were social reasons. I have to elaborate what those social connections would be. So I'm still being general, but a little bit more specific, and that's how I'm going to set up my buckets. Whatever my topics are for my buckets, I'm going to use those to elaborate in my thesis and write a better thesis. We're going to skip this slide so that we have time at the end to do the other activities. So you want to make sure that you use your 10 minutes of planning. And you're going to read and analyze the evidence, identify your groups and the points of view, and then think about the additional document that you could ask for. And just like we already talked about, you can't just say it'd be great to have an extra document from the Pirates of Penzance. You have to exactly say why and how that will enhance your essay. One of the things that I tell my students, if you plan your essay, you'll write a better essay. I know many of you probably like to jump right in and just start writing, but use that 10 minutes that's recommended at the beginning of this portion of the test so that you can have a better plan. Good news. If you get sidetracked in the middle of your essay, but you've already earned 4 points, I'm not going to take any points away from you. So you can write and earn 4 points and then get totally sidetracked and it won't count against you. So that's the good news. It's the same thing with the guessing penalty. There's no more guessing penalty on the multiple choice. So if you get to the end and the proctor says 5 minutes, guess on those last 5 that you haven't got to yet. Okay. Make sure that you answer the question. Somebody in the first section actually nailed it right on the head. It is about the analysis of the documents, not about summarizing the documents. So make sure that you are giving the readers what they want to see. They already know the documents. They're very well acquainted with the documents, especially by day 8 of the reading. You want to make sure that you're giving them a fresh essay that they haven't seen before. So analyze what's going on in the documents and how they help you what? Answer the question, and you're doing what when you answer the question?
Show you know it.
Yeah? What do you, you're providing evidence to prove your thesis. So every piece of evidence that you use in your essay, you want to make sure you tie it back to how it proves your thesis. Bring it back around, full circle. Do your teachers have you set up your documents something like this? Okay. So this is comfortable to you because you're familiar with it. Make sure that you take the time to do that. Give yourself the opportunity to be successful on the essay. Let's do this one real quick. Who is our author? Okay. So what's his job? He's a court official. So he works for whom? The emperor. So what types of information is he going to write?
Positive towards the emperor.
Positive toward the emperor. What happens if he writes something that's derogatory toward the emperor?
He gets fired.
He gets fired and,
Killed.
yeah. So he's probably going to write stuff that's really happy and shows the emperor in a more positive light. You have to keep those kinds of thoughts in the back of your mind when you're looking at POD. So what type of document is this? Okay, it's a report to the emperor, so that makes it a government document, which we would think wouldn't have a point of view one way or the other, except we know that the emperor, if he doesn't like what you're saying, is going to chop off your head. So, you know, probably not going to do that. What else do we know about this document? Okay, the Ming Dynasty. So let's talk historical context a little bit. What do we know about the Ming Dynasty? It lasted for a very, very long time. How did emperors get their power in China? Mandate of heaven, okay? And so obviously the Ming Dynasty was doing something right because it wasn't just one emperor, it was subsequent emperors over and over and over. So they must have been doing something correct. So all of those feed into what you know about the topic. And this one is right from the silver, you did the silver trade DBQ, correct? We are going to do a practice activity now where I'm going to have you spend some time. Don't start yet. So you need a writing utensil and this document that I'm passing out. Alrighty. And I will be timing you. Your time begins now. Show me how you would dissect this DBQ. How would you use your 10 minutes? Don't skip that historical analysis or historical context that's at the beginning. Helps you better understand the information. Five minutes remaining. You should begin bucketing. Yeah. Fair question, yes. You may use documents more than once. You may use them 3 or 4 times if they fit. You should start writing your thesis. Minute and a half remain. All right, time is up. Did you get through all the steps? Isn't it crazy how fast you have to move? You really have to make your brain keep going. What I'm going to have you do now for the next 3 minutes is with your table, your group, I want you to identify the topic and the potential bucket topics and the documents that would go with them. Point of view for at least 3 and additional documents that you thought of. So with the 4 people in your pod, I want you to converse and actually talk about what you came up with. Do you have all the categories that I asked you to identify? POV, topics, additional docs. All right, let's come back together and walk through this together. What is the subject? What is the subject for this essay?
Anticipation of commercial legends.
It's even more basic than that. What did you think?
Power simulator system.
No, it's more basic than that.
Just labor system.
No?
Word.
What?
Analyze the motives.
The motives. It's like that Roman Han that wanted to know about attitudes. So we need to know the motivations. Okay? And all things must help prove the motivations. So we're going to try and identify some topics that would help us identify that. So you said you said coercive labor systems. Is that a motivation? Okay. So who has a motivation that we can throw in a bucket? Yeah.
Law.
Law was a motivation? We'll put a question mark with that one because I'm not sure that we're phrasing it quite right yet. Okay, what do you have? Okay, so that is, we want to grow our economy and we need, cheap labor. Okay, what do you have?
The importation of slaves and colonies,
Is that a motivation?
like the need for slaves to produce.
Okay, so we want to have slave imports.
Gain of power.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We want to increase our position in the world and make everybody look up to us. Okay, and we can have different types of power. So that could almost be 3 separate groups in itself.
I was kind of motivated as the shell of power.
Pardon?
To shell power?
Yeah. Okay. Did you have any other motivations that you came up with? What do you have?
That increase our world trade.
Okay. We want to increase trade because, we need that keyword, world trade. If everybody else has stuff that we can trade for, then they will trade with us for our stuff. What else?
Imperialism.
Okay. Imperialism, ouch, is that going to be in this period? No, it's one of those terms where we know imperialism, the idea has been going on for centuries throughout history, but it doesn't get identified as imperialism until the late 20th century. Okay? Anything else? What do you have?
The view of workers as lesser.
Okay. Social stratification. So law is something that they use to make it happen, and oppression is something that they use to make it happen, but it's not a motivation. Okay, we want to make sure that we keep coming back to these motivations. So what documents could we use to prove social stratification? What do you have? Okay. 2 needs a friend in order for it to be a group. Okay. Any other ones?
1.
That's pretty much like every document in the assortment. What about, we want to increase profits and find a cheap labor. What ones for that? Yes. Okay, what else? What else? Okay, and we want to show power. 6. What about we want to increase world trade? So that extra group would be great for you to have in your essay. Because what if they change it to 3 groups, but one of your groups isn't good? Well, you got a backup plan. Okay, so always think, what's my backup plan? Point of view. Let's do document 2. Who is document 2? You said he was a Spanish what? Okay, what does his document say? Just a synopsis. What do you think?
Saying that all the state detailing the Indians to go to these mines voluntarily, but really they're not going voluntarily, they're being forced to.
Yeah, involuntary labor system. So he's saying they're being told to go voluntarily, but is he also turning around and saying that they're, okay, so he's trying to show both points of view. Okay, which is nice. Okay, involuntary labor systems, ILS. What's his point of view about this whole thing, this motivation? Yes.
He wants to bring up the issue, but he doesn't want to make it big, so he keeps his job.
Okay, so he points it out, but does he take a stand one way or the other? Does he show you his emotion? Okay, so we try and avoid those words because they make the readers cringe, just so you know. So he is, what's another word for unbiased?
Indifferent.
Neutral, indifferent. So we try and use those words instead because they show us that emotional connection that the writer has as opposed to just trying to say he was biased or unbiased. We all have bias. Some of us think that the color yellow is the best, sunniest color ever, but other people cringe when they walk into a room that's yellow, right? So we all have bias toward or against things. We want to avoid that term. All right, how about document 7? Is he pro, con, or neutral?
Seems like he's con.
Okay. So he's saying that having sugar plantations is a bad thing. Right? Pardon?
Until he said it's really dangerous, so that seems like,
Well, he dislikes the idea. Okay, so he dislikes the idea of sugar plantations. Yes.
He might be like a farmer or something, and maybe worried that the plantations are taking his jobs away.
That's an excellent point. So that may be that he's writing from his own economic motivation that somebody else is taking his profit. It's a really great point. Okay, what additional documents would you like to see? Journals. Okay, a journal from whose point of view? A minor's point of view. Okay. Are there any minors present in the documents?
They mention minors, but they don't have a point of view.
Okay, so he's the missing voice. Somebody who is subjugated, who is oppressed, who is involuntarily mining for them. Okay, what information would that give us? Okay.
The result from the investigation of the labor systems.
So it may also give us the result of the involuntary labor system. How do we tie that back, though, to the motivations of the Europeans?
They wanted cheap labor, so they used cultural aspects of the natives to get them to work for them.
Okay. I'm still not sure that we're seeing how, we know that the motivation of the Europeans is that they want cheap labor. But how do I tie this journal from a miner back to the motivations of the Europeans? and we're not being treated fairly is the key part of this. Even though the Europeans are motivated to do this, we need to look at the other point of view and see the human impact, that human rights factor that doesn't exist in this period of time. But we can ask for it so that maybe one of the Europeans would read it and say, oh, what we're doing is wrong. People like William Wilberforce, who is an abolitionist who works against the idea of slavery. What else? Give me one more.
I said a document from a runaway interest rate.
Okay? Why?
Because it would help to explain like his purpose as to runaway, like what the working conditions were and why it was so bad that he ran away.
Okay. And indentured servants were also what? What continental background do they have?
There was a lot of Asian.
Okay? We had a lot of Asian, but we also had Europeans. Doesn't that help us get to the European motivation for this whole topic? So that's a really nice fit that you would have there. All righty. Let's find my clicker. And it's frozen. Swell. On your handout, I gave you a few names of some other resources that will help you as you're preparing. I see that some of you already have Mr. Freeman's handout. Sign up for his blog. It will send you an update every single day as we get closer and closer to the exam. If you feel like you still don't understand DBQs, go to Get a 5. They have short videos that you can watch that will help you narrow it down to what you best need to do for the essays. The other thing that it has is key concept videos. So each of the key concepts, if there's a weakness in your toolbox, make sure that you are going back to that because they're 10-minute long videos, similar to John Green, just not as entertaining. Sorry. As what? So I'm giving you a sticky note. We're going to do an exit ticket. On the back, please write your name and your teacher's name, your WHAP teacher. Pass those. All right. No, they don't. I won't start doing that there. I started doing that. All right. So your name's on the back with your WHAP teacher. And I want you to identify 3 things that you learned today, 2 strategies that you will employ to be a better DBQ writer, and 1 question that you have still remaining that maybe we will have time to answer before you depart. Okay? 3. So, 3 things you learned today, which may be harder for you to do because this year I feel like you guys are really, really well prepared and very aware of what's going on with the WHAP DBQ. 2 strategies that you will employ to write the maximum point earned essay, and then 1 question that you still have. Yes, yes. I'm very impressed that you guys are all Websters, because it is very, very tough to be a Webster. Nobody understands the struggle of a Webster, unless they're an AP bio. All right, what questions could we answer before you depart? Yes, sir.
You have to use in-text citations when using information.
You just have to sign the document. So by in-text citations, do you mean quotations?
Yeah, and like the brackets and being like.
So we love it when the writers use the information, they show their analysis, and then in parentheses put which documents it is. Yes, we love that because it makes it easy for us to tick off in our brain which documents you are using and showing us that you analyzed. Okay, good question. Yes, question?
How do you effectively tie additional documents?
So additional documents can be asked for, guys. Additional documents can be asked for either in the introduction or in the conclusion. Or you can throw it in one of the paragraphs where maybe you're talking about somebody's point of view. You can say an additional idea that would be helpful would be reading the journal of or looking at a map of. Okay? Does that make sense?
It's not quite what
What do you
why I put in that document, the reason
So the reason that you're including that document, not sure. Thank you. All right, you're going to put your sticky notes on the door on your way out, so make sure the door is open. All right. So you want to know how to hide your
like, for example, there's the additional documents, you ask like, how did this tie in?
right.
So, I kind of want to know, like, because once it does decides I'm just gonna
David's gonna be a
how to maybe write it in the
Okay, it doesn't have to be its own paragraph. So what you want to make sure that you're doing is if you ask for an additional document, you want to make sure that it ties back
All right, AP.